Our presiding bishop, you might have already seen this, you probably have, has asked us, not just for Lent, but for the rest of this liturgical year, so until Advent of this year, to observe a fast on Wednesdays, all of us, and to pray for our country. So there are many ways to keep a fast. You don't have to not eat. There are many things you could do. It's something to think about. We have a remarkable presiding bishop, and we are at a remarkable moment in this nation. And what a righteous and faithful thing to call us all to as Episcopalians. And if you're not an Episcopalian, just thinking about it, you could start by observing this fast with us on Wednesdays until Advent, which means after Thanksgiving. So there are many ways to fast. You can decide how you want to do it. The community I come from, we don't eat animal products. That means fast. So you just go vegan, which is fun. There's lots of great food. Some people skip a meal. Some people don't eat at all during the day, only drink water. But I'd ask you to think about it. Think about making that commitment, and think about what you would pray for and how you would offer yourself in this season if you were to have a fast, observe a fast on Wednesdays. So I saw this. I'd seen it announced for a little while and wasn't sure. There's a video. Wasn't sure if I was going to participate, but I decided Wednesday that I was going to do it. I'm sure you also have had a morning where you decide you're going to do something. I decided, probably mostly because I forgot to eat breakfast. So I was like, I was already in it. We're going to do it. And it was a busy day, and it's Ash Wednesday, which is a fasting day anyway. It's a day you hear confessions. And weirdly, it's very Trinity's life that it's a fasting day, it's a busy liturgical day, and of course, I had an all-day meeting as well. So easy to do. So I'm sitting next to one of my colleagues at this meeting and talking about the fact that it's Ash Wednesday and it's a fasting day, and I'm going to do it. And my colleague was like, I don't know, we're talking, not clear what my colleague is going to do. And a little bit into the meeting, knowing what I'm doing and that I'm taking a pretty literal fast on this day, that's what I'm doing. It's Ash Wednesday, haven't been to service yet. Of course you would fast at least until noon, seems reasonable. My colleague, whose name is Mark Bazzuti Jones, you know those bowls of candy you get when you go to a meeting that sit all over the conference tables? Yeah, I took one of those and put it right in front of me. But I know the devil is a liar. So you can do it too, and you probably have better colleagues than I do, right? So we are beginning Lent. And it is serious, and it is important, I think, to hold it a little bit lightly, that we're just people doing the things we try to do, but we are the people called to righteousness. We are the people that carry the weight of what happens in the society that we live in. We are responsible as well. We're doing the best we can. So this last week, as I've been thinking about today and the season that we're approaching, I've had this really unusual image in my mind, and it's from Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking. Do you remember that? That when it came out, it's a stunning book on grief and loss. And it's Joan Didion. Everything she writes is stunning. And this is stunning on a stunning subject. Her husband, John Gregory Dunn, the great writer, dies suddenly. And he dies while her daughter, their daughter, who's quite young, in her 30s, ends up in the hospital with sepsis and then never quite recovers and dies a few years later. So it's just grief upon grief. And I couldn't, frankly, figure out why this book has been on my mind all week. And not just this book, but this particular image from the book. You might remember this. When they were young, so Joan Didion and her husband, John Gregory Dunn, are young writers in Hollywood. They've gone to Los Angeles to make their fortune. And they are very successful very quickly. They're excellent at what they do, screenwriters, novelists, essayists. So they've rented a house, and there's a swimming pool in the back, which you get in Los Angeles, right? There's this pool. And it's just hot, really hot and horrible, the opposite of today outside in New York City. And she finds him standing in the pool in the shallow end, probably a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, because that was when you did that, text in hand, grumbling at it, kind of muttering, how did he do that? How does that work? So he's a writer looking at a text, trying to figure out the magic behind it. Like, how is that structured? How does it work that way? So my invitation to you for this Lent is to join me in the shallow end of the pool, But maybe for this text, we of course take the text, our texts, but also our lives. That kind of turning over and wondering, how does it get to be quite that good or different or better, different than I know how to make it? What is it? It's a little light, it's a little playful, but also quite serious. In most writing, it's reducing or taking out or moving around that is the perfecting, isn't it? It's not slashing, it's not destroying, it's not making it other than it is. It's a perfecting. So I invite you into a place like that for yourself. But I'll start with the text, with today's texts. So we start in Genesis. I think we're supposed to hear that sin is around from the beginning. I think that's the point. But it's a really interesting way to do it, frankly. I think it's an odd way to do it. It's Genesis 2, not Genesis 1. If you've got a Bible in front of you, you can see how odd that is of a choice to make. And we have 2 verses, and then like some of the readings we've had for a couple of weeks now, and we've heard this from our preachers, there's a gap. There's a section that we're not hearing. And then we come to where we are. Your phone will show you this, your Bible can show you this. So that beginning section where God creates the human man, Adam, of the earth, makes Adam with God's hands. It says it's really tender, out of the material of the earth, and then says, don't eat this. Do all these things, don't do this. We know that part. That's where we break. The Bible then says that all the creatures of the earth, of the air, of the sea are created, and that the human Adam names them. That's the next couple of verses. And then it says, God says, it is not good for this human to be alone, and puts it to sleep. It's not clear how the gender works at that point in that text. This thing goes to sleep. And then out of the body of Adam, a part is taken. And again, very tenderly, it's a beautiful passage, God makes another one. And then Adam wakes up and says something very much like, at last. Here is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Here is one like me. So early on in the text, we get that even God seems to understand that this creature needs relationship. It needs one like itself, to see itself, to be itself. And the story is told in a way that makes that clear. The Genesis 1 version doesn't make that as clear, just all the things get made. In Genesis 2, it's clear that there is a desire and a need for us to have one another. And then it says, then we get the part that we have now. So it's beautiful, right? The first words that a human says is because there's another human, and it's a poem of affection, of friendship, of need. Then we get this part where the serpent shows up. And it doesn't say Satan, and it doesn't say the devil. It just says a serpent who's just been created 2 verses before, right? Shows up and has this idea, which technically Eve wasn't around for that time when God said, don't do this. But clearly it has been communicated to Eve somehow in this little time. And then they do, and it says out of desire for wisdom like God's. It's actually not a bad thing to want. It's kind of a beautiful thing to want. It says that the fruit is beautiful. Right? There's nothing that seems problematic in what happens, except that after they have it, and it's clear that it says they should not have had it, but after they've had it, they are ashamed of themselves, literally of themselves. It's an interesting response. The first thing they do is they cover themselves, which is how sin works in the world. Whether or not what we do is on the list of things we shouldn't do or not, literally how sin and evil work in the world is we become removed and cover ourselves and hide from one another and believe we can hide from one another and maybe even hide from God. We cover ourselves, it says. So we have this setting. You know what they're trying to tell us. From the beginning, there has been sin. And maybe they're trying to tell us from the beginning, there has been shame. And from the beginning, there has been covering up and defensiveness and distance. The two that had just been delighted in one another and such close relationship to God that God knows they require one another are now hiding from one another and from God. If that's not the human condition, I don't know what is. Like we see it in children and in babies. It happens so early, and it's devastating to watch. It's the last thing we want for anyone we love. But we are so used to it in ourselves that we wouldn't even know, I think, how to take it away, layer after layer, to be free. It says in the reading from the Romans that actually that grace is given to you to bring you closer. If one disobedience, if one act can be the sign of our hiding and can speak to the human condition so clearly, maybe this other act, and Romans says confidently this other act, of Jesus coming and living in freedom and integrity and honesty, faithfulness, righteousness, can undo this first act. The great dilemma is that it doesn't happen quickly. It is the work of our whole lives. And so today we hear that Jesus is also tempted, or tested is probably a better way to put that, tested out in the wilderness. And the way Jesus finds Jesus himself out there is he's baptized, the Spirit drives him out into this place, he fasts for 40 days, he's really hungry, it says, he's famished, I think is what the text says. And then these tests come. And they're not arbitrary tests. It's not like Mark and his candies, which I don't like anyway, right? I didn't need that candy. It's not like that. It's not way out there where you know you shouldn't do that and someone's messing with you. It's the stuff that's actually really close. This is Jesus' actual vocation, isn't it? It's not that he needs stone to make bread in the next chapter and the one after that. It's that he makes bread. Bread seems to appear out of nowhere. It is the central theme of still us today. We're about to have some bread, right? It goes to the actual heart of who he is and who he will be. And it's almost why don't you do this for yourself now? Let's get started. At the very heart. And at the temple. It's not that he never goes to the temple to be proclaimed who he is in the temple. In a couple of weeks, we're about to take a donkey down Broadway because Jesus went to the temple on a donkey and cleared the temple and claimed his authority within the temple. It's really close to exactly what Jesus must do. In the empires of the world, for better or for worse, that's exactly what happens. There have been many Christian empires over the course of history. He actually becomes someone recognized, again, accurately or not, but recognized by the emperors, empires of the world, the great kingdoms. This is actually the path of Jesus. That's what's laid out for him in these temptations. The question seems to be something about how he's going to get there, what that process is. And it's not really clear, but it's something like that. And he says no, and he says no, and he says no, in the words of the text themselves, right? And it's a very challenging no over and over again. But remember, he is to feed and be fed. That is actually the path he chooses. He is to claim authority in the temple. He is to be the name of God for us, known throughout the kingdoms of the universe, or the planet. I guess not the universe yet, but we're getting there, this planet. It's very, very close. In the same way that redemption and betrayal are close. Redemption comes after betrayal. The test is close. The thing that makes you hide yourself from the world or from people you love is close. These are painful, close places. The work is tender and human and humane. God knows that we need one another. We desire it, and yet we are afraid of one another from the beginning, through the text. And Jesus comes to tell us, try again, let it be healed. It is so hard. I'm not going to pretend it's not hard. And the world is so hard. And I want to put them next to each other. This thing that the presiding bishop asks us to do, it's not that hard to fast. We can all do that, right? But to imagine what justice and goodness and faithfulness might look like for us as a nation, that takes some effort. That's hard to hold and believe it and work for it. It's hard. It's a big, hard thing. And if we think about it, as our presiding bishop says, people think we are often naive for imagining it, right? Or simple-minded, not realistic. But we're asked to stand at that hard place, imagine it, pray for it, fast for it. And for ourselves, like that man standing in the pool, I wonder if the task is to turn it over and look at it, at our lives, at our texts, at this tradition, and wonder how it could be done. Lightly, a little bit. What could you put down? What could you make a little bit more space for, right? What might be a word here that comes over here in your understanding of yourself, in the story that you tell of your own life? What might be the little bit that lets the grace be a little bit more a part of your life. So I was thinking all week, as I keep thinking about this, you might have songs or words that come into your mind like this, and you wonder why? What is your brain trying to tell you? It might just be me, but it happens to me all the time. So I've been wondering why I'm imagining my image of John Gregory Dunn, I don't know what he looks like, so I'm making all that up too, in a pool in LA all week. Like, why am I thinking that? And why do I have a book? And why can I see him doing this? And of course, right, it took me till yesterday to realize it. It's that their daughter dies in the way that we are hearing that people die of the coronavirus. She had the flu, and then she had pneumonia, and then she had sepsis, and then she never quite recovers, and then eventually she dies. It was the first time I had read about anything like that. I hadn't known anyone that died in that way. Since then, I've known of many people that have died in that way, but at that time, it was the first time I had heard it. Of course, it's my brain reminding me that I knew this story, I've heard it before. And we are all standing in the middle of that space as well. We are in a big communal space together. We intend to stay in this big communal space every Sunday this year, every time that you can come. We're going to do this. We eat bread and we drink wine together. We shake each other's hands. We are the vectors, right? And we're in a big city full of tourists, and we love that. And we are travelers, and we love that. So of course, my brain was trying to remind me that if I'm preaching today, I should say something about the coronavirus, which I figured out yesterday, that that's what I should do. I have a friend, many of our friends, I'll take that back, many of our friends are thinking about how to do this in their churches in this week, how to talk about it, how to be the church together. And one colleague of many of ours was trained as a scientist. And so with a couple of journal articles on how contamination, contagion, and the common cup and all that works, because it's been tested, it's a thing, put these studies down, wrote a little piece for his parish newsletter, sent it out as a MailChimp or something like that. Of course, we see it on social media, and I haven't done it yet, but all of us share it because it's such sensible, good advice. And poor thing has been getting responses from all over the country and all over the world about not all of it positive, maybe is the way to say that, taking a lot of grief for making this very earnest effort. But what he says is what everyone has been saying. Basically, please wash your hands. Right? Wash your hands, wash them long. And in places like churches, if we are distributing communion, if we have a chalice in our hand, or we have the bread in our hands, that we have washed our hands. You're not going to see us shaking each other's hands and then distributing those elements unless we've gone to wash our hands. So we can promise that we'll do that. And we would ask you to be careful and safe as well, but know that it's our hands that are the thing that we're supposed to be careful of. So if you are immunocompromised or you are concerned about your health, just don't offer those hands of yours so that they don't touch those orifices of yours that are the way that these diseases can be spread. So just be careful of your hands. And if you feel, as you are thinking about this, it is really helpful to note that we are not just selfishly being nervous for ourselves. We are trying to hold a community that is safe for everyone, and we don't know who is not safe, right? We don't know who is struggling with asthma or who has someone sick at home who might need our extra help to be extra safe. So please be generous and mindful if you can, as well as you can. And the big one for us is always the big question, everywhere I've been when there's a tough flu season, is you got these little wafers, you got this wine. What's the best way to do, what's the most hygienic way possible to do it? And this is what was in the email. You know you're thinking about it. Someone asked me about it on the way in this morning. So this is the Episcopal Church line, but it's also what studies have shown. Is so with these wafers, we're handing them to you. We've washed our hands. We're just putting them on your hand. Go for it in that one. Where you can go wrong is you get this chalice, and we're all putting our mouth on it, which all of our mothers have said we shouldn't do, except here at church, right? And you know that we put that, you've seen that people wipe that rim and turn the chalice so that that's fresh for each person. The people that do that are very well trained and good at that. And that actually has been shown to not be a dangerous at all, it's not a risky action. During the height of all kinds of health crises here in New York, we have used the common cup and we're all still standing. So don't worry about that. What you should worry about, I think, is you've seen me do this probably if you've ever watched me take communion. When I get a little anxious about whether I'm feeling okay or not, I know it, and I know I shouldn't, but I see myself take that wafer and dip it in that chalice. I know I can see you cringing because you're all better than me about this, because somehow it feels a little bit safer. So this has actually been shown in studies, it is not safer. Because God is good, I was given a chalice on Wednesday to hold, and I watched as wonderful Christian people put their fingers with that wafer into that chalice, and boy, did their fingers go in sometimes, and their nails and everything. You know how it goes, and you don't mean it, and by the time you've realized you've done it, you can't fix it, and we can't throw all of that out. You know exactly what I mean, right? And it's the fingers we're worried about. So if you are anxious or nervous at all about taking the common cup, just don't do it. Don't worry about it. This is not for you to, suck it up and do something difficult. We believe in communion in one kind, as all of the tradition does, which means you've got that wafer, you're good. You've got just the wine, you're good. Just don't do it if you feel anxious about it. And if you don't feel anxious about it, go for it. But if you're going to go like this, we're just going to ask you not to. We can't enforce it, but I'm going to ask you not to, and not for yourself, because you're going to be fine, but for people around you who might not know that they are vulnerable in very particular ways to this kind of virus, and frankly to any virus. So I apologize for concluding my sermon with a short talk on hygiene, but that's just what happened. But we want you to know that we are not made to be afraid of one another. There are a lot of forces in our world right now that are telling us to be afraid of one another. And this, on top of it, can really feel defeated and defeating. Let's not let it be. If it feels hard to be here, come tell us so we can figure that out. It's important that we are together. I think it's really, really important. And it's important that we participate in this action, which is one of the few things mandated for us by Jesus. So I invite you in this season of Lent to consider taking on the presiding bishop's discipline, Wednesdays, for the soul of our nation, is what he has said, for the soul of our nation. And maybe for your own heart and your own wellness, consider joining me in the shallow end of the pool and thinking about what it might be in your own life, where there might be some space for you to step back, to edit, to take a little space, to be a little bit more free in your own life. Amen.